This is the fourth and final Commander Ixalan deck. We're going to be going through it, breaking it down by its commander, sub-commander, and the subjects of the deck itself, so pretty much the creatures, instant sorcerers, artifacts, and stuff like that, to answer the big overall question: is this deck worth buying? When it comes to this is solely my opinion, and I've been playing for like 5-6 years, so I have some thoughts on what to do. I know they've changed recently with upping the price and stuff like that, but we're going to go through the deck bit by bit, and hopefully you'll enjoy the video. So let's start off with the commander. So the commander or sub-commander of this deck is Pantalza's Sun's Favored. Pantalza's Sun's Favored, for 2 red, green and a white, you get a legendary creature dinosaur that is a mythic. When Pantalza's Sun's Favored or another dinosaur enters the battlefield under your control, you may discover X, where X is the creature's toughness. Do this only once each turn and is a 4/4. A 4/4 for 5 mana is not really worth it in my eyes, especially since it has no keywords. Usually when it comes to commanders myself, I try to stick between like a 1 and 5 mana cost, depending on how good it is, and I usually go over if it's a really good or powerful card. So the fact that this is hovering on the deep end and is only a 4/4 with no keywords doesn't really seem worth it. But, and this is a big but, it has the new kind of cascade ability with dinosaurs that activate 1 each turn, and then there's white, which also can let you flash stuff in, and there's like other cards you can do. So it does seem worth it solely based on its ability. If somehow you're able to pretty much flash in a dinosaur each turn, you're able to pretty much cascade into a giant army. Plus, there's really big dinosaurs. Imagine paying 2 mana for a Golter and then putting in a 10/10 dinosaur or something like that, or a broken dinosaur, which there is a lot in this deck. So when it comes to this commander, again, I can count this as more of an enchantment commander, which most of these have pretty much been. And now we're going on to the sub-commander, and the sub-commander being Waiter, Trainer's Prodigy. Waiter, Trainer's Prodigy, for a red, a green and a white, you get a legendary creature, human warrior that is a mythic. It has haste. For 2 and a green and tap, target creature you control fights another target creature. This ability costs 2 less to activate if you target 2 creatures you control. If a creature you control being dealt damage causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, this ability triggers an additional time and is a 1/5. So 3 mana for a 1/5 with haste is weird, or 1/5 with haste does seem really weird to me, but the ability is really good. You pretty much pay 3 mana to fight something, or 1 mana to fight 2 things with a higher chance of the creature dying. But if it has a triggered ability, because of the fights, it triggers an additional time. Now my favourite thing about this is, even though this is a dinosaur deck, it doesn't trigger only dinosaurs. So when I seen this and someone said what the ability was before I read the card, I thought, yeah, makes sense, dinosaurs, foster attack, yeah, that thing. But the fact that it can be any creature is absolutely mind-blowing. Pretty much what I would be doing is playing cards with attack triggers abilities, or whatever you want to call them, and then playing just a green and letting it die and trigger it as many times as possible. Because again, I love that it doesn't have to be a dinosaur. And then 3 mana for a commander with an ability like this that also costs less is a really good sub-commander. To be honest, personally, I think is better than the actual commander, but again, that's my own personal opinion. So let's go on to the deck itself, starting with creatures. Of course we're going to start off with creatures. This already seems to be a creature heavy deck based on the commander and sub-commander, so even without looking through the creatures, you could probably guess that there is going to be a high amount of dinosaurs or a high amount of powerful big creatures with like attack triggers and stuff like that, solely based on the sub-commander. But in this deck you get a total of 39 creatures, which I think is the most you can get in a commander deck, at least this year alone. But you get creatures such like Bronzebeak Forger, Wrathful Raptors, Dinosaur Egg, Scion of Calamity, Sunfrill Imitator, Kajali's Sunwing, Temple Atalisaur, Awakening Sun's Avatar, Zetalpa Primal Dawn, Itali Primal Storm, Mordering Raptor, Apex Allosaur, Death Gorgeous Savager, Rampaging Branaton, Repel Behemoth, Ripjaw Raptor, Runic Armasaur, Shifting Ceratops, Topiary Stomper, Veteran Sun's Avatar, Wayward Sawtooth, Quanswood Crasher, Regisaur Alpha, Xenagoth God of Revels, Zekoma Primal Calamity, and Curious Allosaur. Now you get a lot of dinosaurs in this deck and they're very quite powerful. I was actually shocked to see a god in there, but when I realised what god it was, it did make sense for this deck. Plus there was some I was kind of shocked to see. Again, stuff like you get 2 or 3 of the elders and the 3-coloured 3-headed guy. I was shocked to see that. To be honest, again, as a Golter lover, I would love to have seen Golter because it works well with both of them, like this commander and sub-commander. So overall, I was really happy and really delighted. They actually upped what I thought the creatures would have been in this, but what I've noticed when it comes to this deck, that if you're excited about one part of the deck, they're definitely going to let you down in another part of it. So let's go through the rest now. Then we are going to go on to the enchantments of this deck. When it comes to this, there is only a total of 3 enchantments, which isn't a lot. As an enchantment lover myself, I wish there was more, but we're just going to go through all 3 enchantments now. Descendant's Path, From the Rubble, and Rhythms of the Wild. When it comes to Rhythms of the Wild, I really do think it's dirty of them. It is a uncommon. To be honest, with some of the rares I've seen, I think they should be uncommon, but Rhythms of the Wild should always be a rare. It is a absolutely bonkers card, especially in a Gruul deck or a 1/1 counter deck. If you play something like Golter and someone else plays Golter, you go, okay, no, I'm going to play defensively and give it a 1/1 counter. But again, if you play Golter and they play something weaker, you're like, do you know what, I've got a 12/12 Trampler, give it haste. The fact that it has both offensive and defensive abilities and such kind of a low cost really does make this card worth it, and I pretty much think it's worth it in every single Gruul deck, even if you don't run 1/1 counters in it. And then when it comes to the other 2, they do make sense for the deck and they are quite good. So there's not really much to talk about there. I just wanted to go on around about Rhythms of the Wild. But let's go on to the spells, starting with the instances of the deck. When it comes to this deck, there is a total of 4 instances, so since there's not that many, we will just go through them. You get Akroma's Will, Return of the Wild Speaker, Generous Gift, and Path of Exile. When it comes to this, in my honest opinion, the rares are good. They're somewhat pricey, they're under a $5 but over a $1, so I'm not giving out there, and they're both really good cards. I think Akroma's Will is a really good card when it comes to Commander itself. I've been seeing a lot of decks, but it's that good of a card. I'm happy that it's in here. But the uncommons is where I have my kind of downfall. To be honest, I'm sick of them making Path and Swords, but they pretty much switch one of them with Generous Gift, which pretty much is the same in my opinion, just slightly weak because it costs more. But that's what I find weird about this. The rares, really good. The uncommons, not so good. And again, I'm sick of the 2 white exiled cards. But now we're going on to the sorceries of the deck. In this deck, there's a total of 9. Most of them being ramp, like Cultivate and stuff like that. So there's only 3 that were not really ramp. So we'll go through the 3 now. Sandra's Ignition, Fairy Conflux, and Riska's Experience. Now looking at these, I'm like, did they do a switch around? Because the rares are not the best. They're okay, not the best. But the ramp is actually quite good. I know I didn't go over the ramp, but yeah, 9 minus 3 is 6. So there's 6 ramp cards being Cultivate, and I think there's 3 Wishes in there that are both really good ramp cards, and then the rest are somewhat good. So the fact that you get 6 of them pretty much is the equivalent of the 2 rares in my opinion, and then the 3 okay meh rares is the equivalent of the 2 uncommons in the instances. So I do find it weird that they pretty much done a switch around of what is good when it comes to the instants and sorceries. So we are now going to go onto the artifacts of the deck. In total there is 4, but 2 of them are ramp, so we're only going to be talking about 2 of the artifacts. The other 2 is a Soul Ring and Arcane Signet. So the 2 other ones are Progenitor's Icon, Life Crafter's Bestiary, There isn't really much to talk about though, but the Life Crafters card is a actual good card. I actually do generally play that card. Not much, because again, it's bordering, in my opinion, good and just mediocre. So I play it when I think it's good in a deck, but I don't throw it in every deck. I do think it is a good card and misplayed and misunderused. But that's really it. The other one's not really much to talk about. They're both okay cards, but again, as I was saying, the creatures were going to pretty much overshadow everything else in this deck, which I'm now going to prove with the lands in this deck. There is a total of 39 lands, and to be honest, there is a little bit more lands that were actually good to talk about. But again, the lands is where all these decks kind of drop, in my opinion. So I'm just going to name the few of the lands that I actually thought were okay to good. And they are Arch of Orzaka, Company Vista, Cinderglade, Clifftop Retreat, Fortio Village, Fury Calm Snarl, Game Trail, and Kessing Wolf Run. So again, with the ramp cards, these are more likely to be good. And again, these are okay lands, not the best. Pretty much when it comes to all four of these decks, I literally say the first thing you do is up the lands. Pretty much, if you have any spare, somewhat good lands, take them out and put them in the deck. This is where I find all four decks to be the weakest. Majority of them have the best creatures and then slowly die down in certain places, but that's fine. When it comes to these decks, you're not looking for a amazing end-all like 8, 9 or 10 level deck for people that do the levels. I do know when it comes to these decks that they will have weak points, but again, throwing Path of Exile and Swords in, I'm sick of those cards. I actually sold a bunch of them. I actually threw also a handful of just random people. I don't care for the cards anymore. But when it comes to this deck, it's a really good skeleton deck. Buying it straight off the pack and using it, you may win a game or two, but I say most people get these pre-con decks and level them up anyway. I do think when it comes to the leveling up of these decks, there's not as much needed. Like, you don't need as many cards. It's just mainly lands and then a handful of cards, where older ones you needed a fair more amount of cards and lands. But they upped the price for that reason. Again, if they up the price again and do the better lands, I'm not sure how I feel towards that. I do find them upping the product kind of worse. But again, if you want to build a dinosaur deck with one of the two commanders, or in general, it is a good starter deck if you have barely any of the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs is the best part of this. The creatures are the best part of this. And I do think it is good for a skeleton deck. Now, is it worth the price? Probably not. I'd probably say if it was a tenner cheaper, then yes. It's just borderline too expensive, in my honest God opinion. But again, if you have no dinosaurs and you're a dinosaur collector, or starting to be a dinosaur collector, or want to start a dinosaur deck, pretty much throwing the money and taking the loss of a tenner to not pay for all the shipping of all the cards is worth it, in my opinion. But solely using the deck on its own is kind of like you're going into the game with a disadvantage, in my opinion, unless you're playing with all new people. But overall, let me know what you think of the deck. Let me know in the comments down below if there's any cards you think would be really good in this deck. While you're down there, remember to like, subscribe, and follow me on all my social media. But as always, I have the previous Is It Worth It here, a playlist of the Magic the Gathering Is It Worth It here, and a subscribe button here. And again, I want to thank you for all the support I've gotten so far, and I love making these videos, and I'll see you all in the next video.